We want to start today's episode remembering Gino Ojic. Condolences to his friends, family, former teammates. Um, he spent very short periods with a lot of teams and made an enormous impact. He was one of those fan favorite players. He was a fighter. He'd stick up for teammates. He was the Marty McSorley to Gretzky. He was that to Pavel Bure, and a lot of other stars along the way. He played in an era of Islanders hockey that many would forget, but they do remember Gino Ojic. So we just wanted to start the episode remembering him and what he just did for hockey, his contribution to the Islanders and Canadiens and Vancouver and anywhere else that he was. I can't remember off the top of my head, but for anyone who was affected, our condolences. The last week in Islanders hockey has been, in a word, frustrating.
Yeah.
In coming up with the content for today's show, the word self-destruct kept coming up over and over for me. I think getting some of our frustration out at the beginning of the show here and just kind of like broad strokes. The Islanders were coming off of a 6-2 win. No, I'm sorry. That was the following week. The Islanders were coming off of a 2-1 loss in overtime to Dallas.
Yeah.
In what was a good game with a bad result, but this season isn't one that that's acceptable necessarily because they've been all over the map. So a loss is a bad loss no matter how well they played because they need to figure that out. That would have been fine if they had a better record, they had a better last little stretch here, but that's just simply not the case. So our last episode, they were coming off of what was their third loss in a row, heading into games against Minnesota, the Canadiens, and then last night's game against the Washington Capitals. I think we had a lot of thoughts and we were confused about where this season was going. As compared to last week, where are you with the Islanders right now, James?
I'm at the point where I don't trust this team the rest of the season. A decision needs to be made, and I think it needs to be made sooner rather than later, because if they're trying to salvage something, then there needs to be some sort of impact move here. If they're planning on just sitting tight and staying the course, which is certainly not out of the realm of possibility, then the focus towards the trade deadline probably should be, what are we selling to recoup assets that we can turn around in the summer and buy?
I
Because
mean,
this is not,
there's
this as currently constructed, this is not working. The only reason why they are where they are is Ilya Sorokin, and that's really where it starts and ends.
I think we should just kind of go all over the map here. I know we have notes as we typically do, but um, I think you brought up some things I just want to touch on. I think starting with something like the trade deadline, if they do stand pat rather, um, is it does that mean Lamoriello, who we can talk about if he's even the GM? This is after his fifth season, when no one knows what his actual contract is, to the surprise of no one. Um, if he is still the GM or whoever the GM is, are they coming in and kind of blowing things up in the summer? Is that what they're aiming towards? If they don't make any moves, they don't move
Yeah.
anybody, they don't dump any contracts, um, which would be catastrophic. If you thought it was catastrophic last year, it would be a monumental mistake. If they're not going to add anybody, they don't believe they're a mushy middle team, which I think they really are a mushy middle team, save for Sorokin. Um, and obviously, like, Barzal is good and blah blah blah. I'm not saying it's everybody, but he's the one that's actually keeping them in games and um, making them who they are. It to even
Well,
be in
right.
that middle ground, if they don't make any big moves and blow it up, um, it would be a huge mistake. So is that what they're aiming for? It would be, if they don't make any moves now, are they just going to wait for the summer and blow it up?
Well, that's the thing. I don't think anybody's blowing anything up, right? I think if the let's just say, for instance, look, here's the thing. It is Lou Lamoriello's last year. Like this, whether we know what the contract is or not, the fact of the matter is, and I reported this earlier in the week. This is Lamoriello's last year on his contract. Is there an extension in place? To my best knowledge, and to anybody who I've spoken to, his best knowledge, that's not what we've heard. But we also know that that's not necessarily the truth. It could very well be in the drawer. We don't know. The thing is, Lamoriello is 80 years old. He's not in the business of futures, in my opinion. I don't think he is. So it really depends on who's the general manager in the summer, right? Because at this deadline, if he's not going to improve the team, I know I said he's not in the business of futures, but like in the short future, meaning the summer, I think he knows that he's going to get there and have to make some sort of move at that point if he's still around. So if that's the plan, right? You sell at the deadline the pieces that you can. You sell a Varlamov, right, to a team that's contending and needs a goaltender. You consider a Scott Mayfield. If you're not going to bring him back, he's going to get you something.
Now that you have like a Wotherspoon and an Aho,
right.
maybe a Bolduc, like I think before the season, I was very on the get Mayfield back on a cheap deal kind of thing. Now I would be upset, but I would understand because
Right.
at least there's some immediate depth that you can kind of put there. I think that's okay. But yeah, I mean, if Clutterbuck would return, I don't, so many
I think,
injuries. I just like,
yeah,
he's got to go off into the sunset. I don't know if that's with the Islanders and kind of giving up his last year of the deal on LTIR, but that could mean Beauvillier, it could mean Varlamov, it could mean Scott
could.
Mayfield.
What if I said Brock Nelson? What if
I
I said
think
that?
that's an overreaction because it's the problem isn't
Do you think he's ever going to have more value than he has right now? Albeit, I think he's on like a 9-game goalless drought right now.
as I've said before in giving players up, and we were just talking about Beauvillier and Bailey, I think at last summer or whatever the case was, kind of guessing that they would be problematic during the season, which turned out to be pretty correct. I think then you have to find a second line center. And you're already talking
So,
about moving Barzell to the wing. You got to find your top 2 centers. I think
well,
if you're gonna do anything crazy, if you have nothing else, it's strength down the middle. Keep that.
let me stop you right there. They just got a taste of what Atudatu can bring. Is he
He's not
that
ready for
far
C2.
away? But are they?
He's
No,
not ready
I'm
for
not saying
C2.
that. I'm not saying that. But is it out of the question to look at how well Cizikas did in the top 6 role? Look at JG Pajot. Is
Yeah,
it impossible to bump somebody up and have Ratu play third line center?
I think that's very Islanders brain of you to be like, well, we could
Well,
just move these guys up. And it's no, dude, like we have a good 2C. We have a
I agree with
Barzell.
you.
He
No, I
needs
agree
to
with
move
you.
to the wing and just get a good center up there or another winger, whatever the case is. Here's the thing: it's going to be much easier to find a second line winger and a first line center than it is gutting your centers, regardless of what your value is. Unless you're trading a Nelson for that person in a deal, which I could entertain. I mean, I think the thing is, and that's why I say when I mean blow up, I mean things are going to look drastically different.
So here's my thing.
Trading Nelson and adding 2 players there and getting rid of Bailey and Beauvillier and Varlamov and Mayfield is a lot of players on a 23-man roster.
Oh yeah,
That's a
no.
considerable difference. And then your fashing is different. I'm not suggesting all of those players. I'd even question Varlamov. I don't know what value he even has. But he is a really good goaltender with playoff experience, I suppose. He has some decent value. But if he came back on a really cheap deal next season, he has value to the Islanders. Again, you're not to use a Lamoriello-ism, but you're trading a player away to then fill that hole. Are you going to find a better backup than Varlamov? I don't know.
Well, here's the thing, right? You have Sorokin who has started, is it 12 of the last 13 and like 15 of the last 18? He's clearly
How many of those Varlamov was injured though? I think
no,
that's
no, no, no. I mean, yes, but I in the last couple of weeks, I think Varlamov's had like a start. He's been back for a couple of weeks. He's only had like one or maybe two. I don't even think that much. So
yeah.
I think the thing is you can really ride Sorokin. Like he's in his prime. He's going to be there for a while, and I don't see regression coming from him like any drastic at least anyway for a long time. Like he's a freak. He's a super athlete. He's going to be this good for a while. You sell Varlamov, you get a serviceable backup, right? Thomas Grice might be a free agent coming into the summer. Get Thomas Grice to start you 15 to 20 games and ride Sorokin. My point here wasn't sell Mayfield, Varlamov, Nelson, Anthony Pavilion, like not all of them. I'm just saying you
I
go into
mean,
the
Bavilier
deadline.
Bailey, into the
Yeah,
sun. Don't care. I don't know
absolutely.
what value they have. I
I'm saying
get them out of here.
you go into the deadline with an open mind to recoup assets. This is a draft where GMs are friggin' salivating at the chance to get their hands on this talent. If the Islanders aren't going to draft and they're going to buy in the summer, then you get those assets to buy in the summer. Um, I don't think that Lamoriello is thinking long term, as in a retool or I shouldn't say retool, as in a rebuild that's going to take a couple of years. I think that he's thinking short term. If I'm not going to buy now, I'm going to buy in the summer, and I'm going to sell off pieces that is on that are on expiring deals, and I will turn that into something in June, in July. So that's if Lamoriello is the general manager. If he's not the general manager and it is somebody else, I still think that the Islanders are in no man's land. They're in a position where they don't have anything coming through the pipeline after Aturatu, right? Maybe William DeFore,
I think Bolduc.
maybe Bolduc, maybe. But we're talking about like bottom six guys. Like we're not talking about like there's nobody in this Islander system that's coming as don't worry, we have help on the way. It's not coming. What I do see is they have the pieces all in their mid 20s and on, let's call it what it is, long-term contracts. Barzell's here for the next 8 years. Sorokin, I'm pretty confident that's going to get locked up when he's due, which I think is this summer or is it next summer? Either way, you have Pelican Pollock for the next 6-7 years. You have Noah Dobson who just signed a 3-year deal. Alexander Romanov who just signed a 3. Like everyone's in their mid 20s. You can retool this roster the right way, and the only way to do that is to you know trade a Bavilier. He needs a new start.
Oh my God,
The
does he
Vancouver
ever?
Canucks, want NHL players in exchange for theirs. They want guys. This was quote from Jim Rutherford. We want guys in their mid 20s. No one in the NHL is selling guys in their mid 20s. You know who should? The Islanders. They should sell Anthony Bavilier to Vancouver. You need a fresh start. You know who needs a fresh start in Vancouver? Brock Besser, who scores 25 goals perennially.
I mean, yeah, it would be Bavilier plus a thing,
Sure.
and that's totally fine. Or Bo Horvat or whatever the deal is, whatever the deal is.
Right.
I think part of the issue when I think about when I blowing the team up is they need to insert a lot of skill in their top six. I think you're talking about um I don't necessarily understand where a Palmieri fits in long term or a Wallstrom fits in long term because let's just say it like it is at the moment. Um, and the lines have just been so jumbled I can't even like actually process who's in what position at this point. Was it Parise, Bailey, Barzell against the Caps?
Yep. Don't get me
If you're
wrong. Zach Parise is an excellent player at 38 years old. He's not a first line winger. I
No,
understand Matthew Barzell has been open about the fact that he likes to play with Zach Parise. I understand he's been open about the fact that he likes Josh Bailey. That's great. That's not enough.
100%. So my point is, if when you move, say you move Bailey and Villiers, Wallstrom magically comes back, Palmieri magically comes back. Okay, well that's their spots, right? I don't know what monumentally needs to happen to like actually open up roster spots. That's a big question for me. I understand a Bavilier plus a something prospect and a pick for Besser. I don't know what his contract looks like, or Bo Horvat or something. I suppose that's a roster spot for a roster spot. Um, Fashing might not be long for the NHL roster so long as a guy like Clutterbuck or Martin are around, and Parise for that matter. So like I think there's a lot of maneuvering to happen on that main roster, and that's why I say blow up. Like I think it's a lot of players that need to go. Like Wallstrom is clearly at least a middle six player at this current point in time. He has the tools to become a real sniper, and he's how old is he? 22. He's more than enough time to. I'm trying to look up his age, but he's not on the main thing. He's on the IR, and I can't find it. But oh, there he is. Yeah, he's 22. He has more than enough time to grow into his own. Like he could easily be a top six winger, a top line winger in the future. That's it. For now, he's a middle six player. He should be playing with a Pajot and a Fashing or something, or a Parise, right? Like that's just where he should be playing right now. Um, there should be 3 open spots in the top 6. That's ultimately like moving Bailey and Bavilier. Again, I don't know where that puts Palmieri. Does that put him on the second line, and then you have 2 wingers open next to Barzell? That that's really hard to find a top line right and left winger.
Right.
So that's I don't understand. I don't understand what they're going to keep and what they're going to let go. I think that's my main question right now. Thinking about roster construction. If you have all those bottom 6 guys, like maybe is Parise just not going to come back next season? He has no reason not to. Fashing, fine, whatever. But Wallstrom presumably be back at some point. Palmieri will presumably be back at some point.
Right. I mean, you have Holstrom here now still. I mean,
Yeah,
let's
but
just assume.
and that was another guy. He played on the top line too. He was also up there.
Right. I think
Um,
we could assume, you
which oh
know,
god, what a joke!
well,
I don't understand. I don't understand how nothing nothing's happening.
right.
And we're just doesn't mean he's not on the phone, but like we're not seeing it, and it's gotten worse. They've won
It's
2 games this month.
yeah, and I understand the urgency, and I think about this other thing too that I was talking to somebody earlier today about how there's just actually nothing going on around the NHL right now. Like at this point, there's usually like rumors galore and like rampant, you know, discussion on like what might happen. There's really not much going on right now, and it's not an excuse for Lamoriello. This is not me saying that it's justified that nothing has happened yet. I just do think that we're still in a hard cap era of hockey where um
But
it's
he's not been
harder.
successful,
No,
frankly.
you're right, and like I said, this isn't an excuse for him. Something does need to happen. Like that's how I started the show. I said it, outright. Like something needs to happen now, and if it doesn't, then sell off your pieces. I firmly believe that. It's just I think league wide, many GMs are having a hard time doing anything. At any moment. Does that excuse Lamoriello from doing something? No, I just think it league wide it is tough. But you're right. I mean, I'm looking at the lines on Daily Faceoff right now. Parise, Barzell, Bailey. Like those to the left and right of Matthew Barzell should be significantly upgraded.
Yeah, it can't
Significantly.
be Wallstrom, it can't be Holmstrom.
No.
Like, you gotta think it was
The
Palmieri for, like, a hot second. Like, it's, like, 6 guys that play with him. Then
right.
then he's playing with Zizekas, he's playing with Nelson for a second, he's back with Lee for a second. it's just, and that's not to say, and again, talking about blowing it up, this chicken shit leadership on this team right now. And I hate saying that about Anders Lee and Clutterbuck, but where the hell were they after that Pajot hit?
Yeah,
Nobody
I
stepped
did.
up with Ovechkin.
I did
The
want to talk
lack
about that
of,
hit too.
yeah, I'm pointing that out as part of a larger picture. We can definitely dive into that more specifically, but this is the lack of focus going into games. This is the lack of ability to finish games. This is standing up for your teammates, and it's not just on Ov hit on Pajot. What with Pellick, with Palmieri, with Wallstrom, with Holmstrom. Um, where is this leadership? And
Well,
is it or is it the players? And as we discussed last week, is it Lambert too? Where the hell is he?
so
Did he
and that's
lose the
something
room? I hate to
I
say
was
it
just
like
going to
that.
bring up because like we're talking about how this team has a lack of finish. I like to call it they have a lack of killer instinct. They were up 3-0 at the 30-minute mark of the game yesterday against Capitals. The second a second later after the 30-minute mark, Ovechkin ties it. The Islanders don't have killer instinct. And I'm not talking about, a guy who's going to go out there and just start crushing guys on the ice and quote unquote kill them. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about guys who want to drive up the score no matter how many goals they're up, right? They don't have goal scorers as it is, but they don't have somebody who's salivating at the idea of, I want to be up 8-0. Okay, we're up 8-0. I want to be up 10-0. Oh, we're up 10-0. I want to be up 12-0. They don't have that guy, right? And we talk about, and to his credit, he's an all-star, for the first time this season. We talk about how Brock Nelson is the Islanders goal scorer. Well, he hasn't scored in 9 or 10 games.
A quick just rundown of that. So
Go ahead.
Kurz and Pantorno both had different versions of this. I just grabbed one from Kurz. Dobson, 0 goals, 12 games. Nelson, 0 goals, now 12 games. And Dobson, I suppose, is 13 games. Bailey, 1 goal in 14 games. Bavillier, 2 goals in 13 games. Peugeot, 3 goals in 17 games. The best goal scorer so far out of this list. Holmstrom, 1 goal in 17 games. You can't have that. You can't.
Right.
If last night, who scored the goals? Aho, Fashing, and Martin. If those guys are scoring goals, if two of them score goals in a game, you win that fucking game.
Right.
End of discussion. You should win that hockey game. That's not giving you a 3-0 lead. That you should have gotten 2 more goals just because it should have been 5-0, 5-1, 5-2, fine. But Barzell someone should have had one.
They also don't have on the Islanders anyone with more than 15 goals, right? I think everyone is everyone
15 and
14,
below.
15 and below,
Because
right?
Nelson and Lee have 15.
Okay. Now, I want to take a look at, and this was just a random player that I thought of just because of the pure fact that he is on my fantasy team. So I just remembered. Um, but I want to take a look at Brandon Hagel, right? He's been one of the more consistent players for the Tampa Bay Lightning this year. He's by no means leaps and bounds better than, let's say, Brock Nelson. He's a good player. He's a real good player, and he's on a real good team. But let's see. In his last 10 games, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, he has 5 goals, 6 assists for 11 points. So he's scoring a point per game in his last 10 games. Let's now take that a step further and let's look at his last 20. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 10 goals, 10 assists in his last 20 games. You could not find one single player on the Islanders who is that consistent. Not one.
No. I mean, this season has been, again, and I point that to leadership. Behind the bench, and if you're Lou Lamoriello saying and touting the fact that you have this veteran core group and this and that, and there's good leadership and it's in the locker room and these guys play for each other. Not this year. And
No.
and frankly, it wasn't there last year. You can throw whatever excuses you want. Now we have a year and a half of this, right? Now you can question, was last year due to all those excuses? I'm not really sure. They ended the year in ninth place,
Right.
just outside the wild card, right? Um, again, 8 wins. I'll say that until forever. They were 7 or 8 wins different from making that. And if they won against the Capitals or the team in the first wild card, any one of those 8 games, it's probably less than that. It may be 6, 5 or 6. I'm not really good at that kind of math, so I don't totally
Right.
understand that. But had they won any one of even those games and of the teams above them, it makes a huge difference.
Right.
I don't know that they're capable of it. I think they're a ninth place team or a 10th place team.
And this is
And
why, but this is why you're right. They're a ninth place team, 10th place team, right? Because we just spoke about Brandon Hagel, who had, you know, 9 points, 10 games, 10 or 20 points in 20 games, right? I chose a different team, chose a different player. Mika Zibanejad, 9 points in his last 11 games. Okay, let's look at his last 20. 21 points in his last 20. Like, this is what I'm talking about. You don't have one player on the Islanders who is doing this. You don't. You have guys who, and this is something I spoke to somebody about earlier as well. You have a bunch of streaky players on this team who all happen to go hot at once and then cool off at the same time, because these are the players who are taking advantage of the games where the momentum is swinging in their favor heavily. They collect all their points in those games, and then in the games where the Islanders need it most, they disappear. They
in the regular
disappear.
season, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
right, and we say the regular season because there's one player in particular that we think about who disappears during the regular season and then is the best player in the world in the playoffs, and it's Anthony Beauvillier. He is that in that situation, but for the rest of the Islanders, it's one or the other, right? In playoff Anthony Beauvillier, sure, I'll take him 10 out of 10 times, but regular season Anthony Beauvillier doesn't cut it, and that's the majority of the team. The majority of the team disappears at the same time because they're not feeding off of the momentum. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
they are feeding off of the momentum. That's what I meant to say. Like, they're only feeding off the momentum, and that's when they collect their points. And we're like, oh, look at this. This is great. Brock Nelson is on a 10 game point streak, right? But I'm sorry, he's got 10 points in his last 10 games, right? But he had 4 points in one game that was a 4-1 blowout, and he scored or a 6-1 blowout. He scored four of those points after they were up to 3-1, 2 goals, and then they lost a close game 2-1. He had no points, right? Nobody's showing up in those moments and putting the team on their back and propelling the Islanders to
Yeah.
to
And that's
win these
when
games.
and then you have Barzell who doesn't really have the help, trying to do too much. And he played terrible against the Caps. He was trying to, and he lost them that game. He lost Orlov going down. I'm sure everyone saw that GIF. Isles Fix posted it as they always do right after, and a bunch of other people. But they just lost. Barzell lost Orlov down the slot, and he just came right in unabated. And
Yeah,
but he was doing terrible shit all game. And he's kind of been doing that. He's gone. We had a few games there where um, he was really playing north south hockey, and it was making a huge difference. He was scoring goals, and now he's back to the Gretzky curls. And whether you want to say no one's with him or not, he's making bad passes. It works sometimes. A lot of the times, it doesn't. He's up there in giveaways. We discussed, a lot of good players are. His are so egregious, though. I think
I
that's
think
where
I think this is
I
one
have a
of
huge
those
problem.
things. I think this is one of those things where, and it's your favorite term, two things can be true. Right? He has a lot of giveaways because he always has the puck, and the better players tend to do that. But he's also making some egregious plays out there. Maybe three things can be true. The reason why he's doing all of this in culmination is because he's trying to do too much because he knows he's alone. Maybe that's true too. Regardless, it's all true, and it's not good.
Yeah, I'd rather him try to go north south and beat players and get poke checked or whatever than give the puck away at the blue line, right? I think that's the unexcusable part for me because you learn that in sports.
Yeah.
Don't make an east-west pass in the blue line, dummy.
Right.
How many of us have heard that growing up? Like, why is he doing that? That's a bad fucking play most of the time, unless it's the power play or you have that avenue open or it's a sick pass. But a lot of times it's going to get picked off. It's the NHL, and you just keep seeing this where
So
it happens in a lot of games. It's not just the Islanders are. We are obviously paying close attention to that, but I hear that on other podcasts about other teams. It happens all the time.
So you were talking about earlier, like, did Lambert lose the room? What's the general belief amongst, within the organization, amongst the players, amongst the coaching staff, yada yada. Um, one comment that was alarming yesterday, and maybe there's layers to this, but was that Lambert said that there's plenty of finishers on the Islanders. There's plenty of finishers on the Islanders. And okay, yeah, sure, there are, right? We know Kyle Palmieri can finish. We know that Oliver Wahlstrom can finish, although those two players are injured and not playing. But fine, we know that Anthony Beauvillier can finish. We know that Anders Lee can finish. We know that Brock Nelson can finish. We know that if he wants to, JG Pajot can finish. However, they're not.
So here's this. So IslesFix posted something yesterday about that the Islanders are 22nd in the league in goals per game, despite having 26 goals from their defense, second most in the league. At that point, they had scored 2 goals once in the last 8 games before last night. I retweeted or quote tweeted it and said the Islanders team shooting percentage is 20th in the league at 9.9%. Now, granted, 11 or 12% is kind of nuts. So it's not like they're that far off. But there are only 4 teams sub 10% that are in a playoff spot. At the
Right.
time, that included the Islanders.
Right. So the thing is, like, the reason why they're so low in those categories is because look at the Boston Bruins, who's shooting their pucks consistently and scoring. David Pastrnak. Look at the New York Rangers, who's shooting their pucks. Mika Zibanejad, he's scoring. Look at the Washington Capitals, right? There's not another Alexander Ovechkin in the league, but they have him, and he's scoring their goals, right? And like, look, take Ovechkin out of the equation on that team. They're, in my opinion, they're just like the Islanders. Take Ovechkin out, they're just like the Islanders. Maybe weaker goaltending, but the makeup of the rest of the team is just like the Islanders. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that if the Islanders had this bona fide shooter, this guy who is going to shoot 10 pucks a game, but one of them is going to go in.
Yeah, but they still score. He's got 30 goals on the season, Ovechkin.
Yes.
They still scored 118 other goals.
Right, but here's the thing:
Like they're
it's a
still
trickle.
scoring.
It's a trickle down effect because you have to put your best players out on the ice against Alex Ovechkin. Now you have players of lesser quality, going up against TJ Oshie on the second line, right? If Brock Nelson didn't have the best competition defending him, he probably wouldn't be on this 9-game goal drought. Because on the first line, playing with Matthew friggin' Barzal would be Timo Meier that everyone's fucking worried about.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about that.
So the thing is here. Look at all the teams that are succeeding right now, and you and I had this conversation, a couple weeks ago where I wasn't as hard on the Islanders as you were being, and now I've gotten to that point. I had said to you, look at the Colorado Avalanche right now; they still have Rantanen and McKinnon and Kyle McCarr, and they're not doing well. I don't think that that's the rule. I think that's the exception. I think that they're going through a lot of adversity over there with injuries. They haven't had Gabriel Landeskog all season. I think there's a lot going on in Colorado, plus the Stanley Cup hangover. I think it's different. Look at all these other teams who are succeeding. Like I listed before, the Zibanejads, the Pasternoks, right? Dallas has Jason Robertson. Like, these are the players who change the makeup of your team, right? Just that one guy changes the makeup of your team. The Islanders need that one guy. They have the center, right? And this is how I break it down in my mind. They have the center. They have Barzal. They have the goaltender. They have Sorokin. They have the defenseman. They have Dobson, and they have the good supporting cast behind him too, and Pelech and Pollock and Romanov. The Islanders have a supporting cast behind Barzell, but they don't have the shooter. You need the shooter. If I'm personally, if I'm Lou Lamoriello, and nobody knows what he's going to do, but personally, if I'm Lou Lamoriello, and maybe this has happened already. This conversation, they've approached it, and I think we spoke about it last week. We alluded to the fact that Tim Burke of the San Jose Sharks was at UBS Arena. You have to get Timo Meier. You have to. There is no excuse other than another, and this is the obstacle that Islanders are going to run into. There's no excuse other than the fact that other teams have deeper pockets not to get this guy. He is on a 45 goal pace. He is on a bottom 5 team. No slight to a Logan Couture or a Thomas Hertl. In my opinion, Matthew Barzal is a much better center than those two players, and he is making things happen on his own, playing with good centers. But if he played with an elite center in Matthew Barzal, and he's making things happen on his own, I think he's on pace for 45 goals on a bottom 5 team.
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right in a huge part of what you're saying. I'm going to give you a quick quote from our buddy Joe Pantorno. Then I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
You know, in a recent article for AM New York, definitely go read it. Joe said, it's abundantly clear that Lamoriello is at a crossroads here. Either he has to spring into action quickly to make a move, a trade, a benching, a buyout, to show his Islanders that he still believes that they can compete for the playoffs, or he stands pat and invites the seemingly increasing prospect of sweeping changes to the organization that could await this offseason. Now, we've touched on, will Lamoriello be the GM, or at least a little bit, and what that could mean for the offseason. On the trade front, or a benching, or whatever, an honest question. So you bring up Timo Meier. It could be Bo Horvat. It could be Brock Besser. It could be anybody. Whoever that one player is. And I think that there are options. And I think Lamoriello should do something, because I believe in the roster to a degree. But I'll ask you this question. Are the New York Islanders truly one or two moves away from being a serious contender?
I've thought that, and I still think that for a little while. It's one of those things where the right player coming in creates that trickle down effect where everyone is just now in the right place. In my opinion,
I think there's a lot of truth to that. I have to be honest. I think, I don't know if I 100% believe it, just based on, I have, we have been here before. We have watched this team lose. Despite 2-3 seasons, of Barry Trotz's success, with a roster that should not have done anything. I have to be shown the evidence, and directly after the games. Like that's the only evidence that I am willing to kind of take there. I want them to do it. I want to see what happens there, because at least then we'll know. It's clear that this isn't it, right?
I think about this last night, and spare me the bullshit if you don't care about the New Jersey Devils, because I cover them too. But this is just what happened. The New Jersey Devils were losing in the last minute of the game, and they put out their best players to pulled the goalie, put out their best players in the final minute, like every team does, to try and score a goal. And who scores the goal with 8 seconds left? Jack Hughes. But who's on the ice with Jack Hughes? Dougie Hamilton, Jesper Bratt, Nico Hischier, Andre Palat. Like, holy crap! Like, are you worried about that? Those 5 other players, including Jack Hughes, who's like having an MVP caliber season. Like, you have a lot to worry about. You have a lot to handle there. And sure enough, they score the goal. with the Islanders in the last minute of in the last minute of a game, they're putting out Matthew Barzal, who everyone's looking at, and a couple of other guys. Right? It's going to be Brock Nelson because he's the shooter. Anders Lee's going to be in front of the net, but nobody is out there that they're like, shit, I have to look two ways.
It's Dobson and Barzell to a degree. All of this worked under a certain system for a long time, and we do see flashes of success, right? There are basic hockey things that will just continue to work. Screen the goalie, shoot the puck, move it around. Like that's I hate to say, like some of these, like at the NHL level, I can't imagine there's a lot of like other than like larger systems and encouragement and blah blah blah. I don't know what level of coaching actually goes into this. I'm very curious as to how all that works because there's no teaching. Like you're not teaching these guys anything, but it's really maximizing, and putting players together and maximizing the roster that you have. I think is kind of what's going on, or at least the start of it. This group just isn't working the way that it used to. I have a hard time believing that I want to see it happen, but I don't think it's one or two players away unless they're serious players. Because I think there's a little bit of it is I don't think Lambert is working. There's something about how yes, I think it's partly the roster. I know that's what you're gonna say, and that's on Lamoriello. It's 100% on Lamoriello. Some of it's on these guys too, for being in that in a gutless overtime loss to the Washington Capitals, not stepping up for their teammates, lack of leadership, all of that stuff. I think there's a lot of thinking that they have to do for themselves. I also think, and we've said this for a long time, whatever the hell Lambert is doing, especially on defense, we had that discussion last week. This defense isn't that different, right? It's Andy Green and Chara different. They got younger with Romanov and Aho and Wotherspoon and Pelech, whatever, blah, blah. Why does the defense suck? Why do they not look like they know what they're doing anymore? That's not a them thing. That's they're being told to play within a certain system. Like there's a lot of, again, 2-3 things can be true at a time. I think a growing thing is I think he did lose the room. I think after, just as Barry did, and it might just be this group. Look at Vancouver. They can fire a million coaches. It doesn't matter. That team sucks. Rutherford put together a bad team.
Yeah,
and
I can hear that.
I think Lamoriello put together a bad team, and it worked for a little bit when it was the exact right formula. You can throw a million excuses at the wall last season, and that's totally fine. I don't think ending the season 7 or 8 wins different, maybe 5 against with wins in certain games is enough for that to stick. And then following it up with 5 or 6 months of this bullshit, I don't know, man. I think it's all three. I think Lamoriello's doing a bad job at roster construction. I think this team is lacking leadership and frankly guts and playing for each other right now. And I don't think the Lambert thing is working. And I don't think any coaches, unless it was a major change, was going to work.
I don't know if I don't necessarily agree with that 100%. I think the sample size is too small to pin this on Lamoriello. I think that he was just dealt
2 years.
It's not 2 years. It's
last year at a year and a half. They're in the same. They're in 9th place. Like they're in the exact same position as they were last season.
Lambert wasn't the head coach last season.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like it doesn't matter it clearly doesn't matter who the coach is. It's a roster problem, which is a Lamoriello problem.
Well, okay, but now when looking into the numbers, they're scoring more goals. They're playing a faster game, like technically.
Yeah, but you can score more goals. You said it the same way. They scored 6 goals against Vancouver. Great. That's going to boost their goals per game.
Right. No,
they're shooting 2 times more a game. They were shooting 28.8 shots a game for 30th last year. As of, before the Caps game, they were shooting 30.6, which was 20th. They had 2 shots more a game. That's not exactly quantity over quality that we were seeing with Barry Trotz.
No, you're right.
And they're scoring marginally more, but I'd look at when they're doing it. They scored. Then they followed up with 5 goals in 4 games. I don't know. Their
I
record
think
is terrible. I think it's the beginning. Sorry, I keep cutting you off. The
no, it's okay.
beginning of the beginning of the season is buoying their numbers right now. I think you cut off from a
Yes.
certain point, and I did just see, if you don't mind giving me a second, I did see a friend of the show, uh, and I guess our former Isles Inside boss, Andy Graziano. He said Islanders have won consecutive games only once since the end of November, uh, 12-23 to 12-29. They were 15-8-0 after beating the Flyers on 11-26. 8-10-4 since. I'd look at those dates and those numbers and then say, since that date, since November 27th, how many goals per game are they scoring? And then what was it before that? I bet you it's buoyed from the beginning of that.
Nassibin Hockey is brought to you by DraftKings. The NFL action continues. We're one step closer to Super Bowl 57, and for the NFL division round, check out DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. New customers can bet just $5 and get $200 in free bets instantly. Plus, all new and existing customers can take a shot at an even bigger payout with DraftKings stepped-up same-game parlays. Boost your NFL winnings with each leg you add up to 100%. After a big game last week by Danny Dimes and Saquon Barkley, we'll be keeping our eye on the New York Giants this week against the Philadelphia Eagles. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. New customers can bet $5 on the NFL divisional round and get $200 in free bets instantly, only at DraftKings Sportsbook with code THPN. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details.
Obviously, the Islanders are playing a much different system this year. I wonder how well that system would work if, like I said earlier, the Islanders get the right guy who plays the top line role with Barzell and knocks everyone down a notch in the depth chart. Everyone's now where they belong.
I
How
want
well does that now work? That's why
I want to believe that.
that's why I'm hesitant to blame this on Lambert, the first year coach who was given this same exact team as last season. And, yeah, sure, it worked, 2 seasons ago and the season before that. But we've been having the same conversation for 3 or 4 seasons, 5 seasons now, that there's a clear need here. And it's a
Oh, it's
bona
been a
fide,
10-year conversation.
yeah, it's a bona fide scorer. It's a top line winger. It's somebody to play on the first line with the Islanders' first line center. They haven't had it since then, and that's just the one gaping hole. So
I'm willing to give it a shot. I want them to do it because I want it to at least start that conversation at how do we build up the rest of that roster to make it work? How do we add even somebody else in addition to that?
yeah, I mean, like, and that's like that was the opportunity this summer, right? Add the big name so that at the deadline you can add somebody else, right? Could
I
you
think they're a bigger fish. I think that in hindsight, that'll be a good thing. At the time and going into the season, I you could have just wrote this team off. I would have been, if someone was like, most people were, um, you could have said this was going to be a bad season. They started, and a lot of those goals, I think the goals per game piece, just to go back to that for 1 second, you gotta remember all those comebacks they were doing. They were scoring 4 and 5 goals a game for a while. That wasn't sustainable. We said that at the time. You can't win
right?
games. I know they're winning games. They're 15-8. That's fine. I'm sure we can go back and find that podcast. I probably had a whole rant on it. It's not sustainable. You have to find another way to win. They were just coming against Colorado, a healthy Colorado team. No, the way that they were winning those games was not sustainable.
Right. No, yeah, you're right, and that's the thing. Like, it's not sustainable, but you also shouldn't be in that situation in the first place because you shouldn't be having to chase leads like that because you're giving up 3 goals in 3 minutes, going down 3-0, and like you need somebody who's going to change the momentum. And
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but Barzell can't do it by himself. I know there are
No.
guys in the league like Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon who can do that, but he's not on their level. He's if they're the top, he's right underneath. Like that, it's a second tier to their first,
Yeah.
and it's just not sustainable for him to do that. Now, does that mean that it's impossible for him to um do that sporadically? No, it's not. And you know when it would become even easier? If he had someone else on his line that the other team was also looking at. But they're not. Because when Zach Parise and Josh Bailey are trotted out with Matthew Barzell, nobody on the team, nobody on the ice gives a shit about those two guys. They're
It's
looking
it's
at Matthew Barzell.
it's embarrassing at this point. I don't understand how they're doing that. I don't know that, and Barzell may just be getting frustrated at a certain point, and that's, he's trying to do too much. He's gripping his stick a little tight. He was finally scoring some goals. It's crazy, and yeah. So we learned, I think last episode we did say that, there were a couple people that had pointed out that the Ratu slide thing, and Kurz kind of said what I was thinking, which was keep Ratu up. Who cares if there's a slide? It was working. Is Cizikas a long-term answer? No. Why were you changing that? You were finally starting to see some
here's the
success. Like,
thing.
that's like the brain dead move that you see from Lambert. Like, I don't understand why you would do that. I understand some of that's with Lamoriello. Like, he's making that decision. He's saying Bratu's getting sent down. But the Islanders were 4-3-0 with Ratu in the lineup, and they're not good without him. 0-2-1,
What if I
0-2-3,
said this?
or
What if I said
0-3-1, whatever.
What if I said this? What if, and this is just me speaking this into existence, but what if the reason why they're not burning a year off his contract is because Ratu is more valuable with that third year still on his contract in a trade for a Timo Meyer type?
I think it's an interesting theory. Anything is possible. I think the thing is, I don't understand what they're waiting for. Like, if you're going to do that, you knew at the beginning of this month you needed to do that. What is San Jose just like not ready? Like that, I guess I don't understand the timing. What are you doing? Make the
I mean,
trade,
they're
or
they're probably fielding offers. They're looking at the market. Like, unless they're being blown away by an offer, they're going to take their time with it.
yeah, but
In
I
San
don't
Jose,
understand. Sometimes
the Islanders don't have the assets to blow them out of the water. That's the thing.
yeah, I don't know I don't know that team well enough to know what they need. So it's I don't understand if you're San Jose why you would trade a Meyer. I guess he's expensive. But like I don't know. I don't
The-
know. I don't understand why teams trade these players sometimes. I'm like,
Well,
the Vancouver.
San Jose is going into a rebuild. That's why he's 26. He doesn't fit by the time they're good again, he's going to be in his
I guess so.
almost mid 30s. So
That's crazy. I get that makes sense. It just same thing with Vancouver. Like, why did you prioritize signing JT Miller and not Bo
that
Horvat?
is a question that I don't think anybody fucking understands. Nobody gets that because
No.
they had Bo Horvat sitting there and they were like, nah, JT Miller sounds good.
And then he's been dog shit. Talk about a
It's
hindsight
awful.
thing.
It's awful.
You're how
The
glad
Islanders
I
didn't
said
need
this
that
last
guy.
week. Ooh, there may have been more like Lamoriello might have hit the kibosh on that for sure for whatever reason, like it leaked, but he may have also just thought twice about it and said no, but he knew something. I don't want to give him that much credit necessarily, but I'm glad he didn't do it.
Maybe.
And just to go back to something that I was saying before, and because I kind of lost my train of thought going on a tangent. I think at the time last summer we were so mad that some kind of trade didn't happen or some kind of free agent signing didn't happen, and in the moment I think we were absolutely correct. I think an overpayment for some of those older players, that was who was available. So I don't think anyone would have blamed Lamoriello for doing it. For instance, Kyle Palmieri. He was a little older. I understand making that trade. He was the best player available at that trade deadline, and it ultimately helped the Islanders going into that second long playoff run.
Well, and let's make no mistake about it too. When he was the guy who was available, when he was available, everybody was banging that drum.
Everyone was, and exactly. I think that was at the time that was really good, and long term, we're not going to love it, and we're not. I mean, he's injured, so that is what it is. But all that is to say, it does leave Lamoriello more room to do something now. I think making a trade, it's arguable what's more expensive or not. There's assets to be traded at the trade deadline, or there's literal dollars during free agency. Part of what is probably holding up any Lamoriello deal, as we know, the only thing we do know for sure, is that he's not going to make a trade like this, especially if you have to give up a lot of assets, if there's not a deal in place to sign that player, if they're an RFA or a UFA. So that's likely what's holding that up, because he's got to do that and figure it
Yes.
out with anybody that he's talking to.
Yeah, and,
So
and again, and I know we keep talking about the same player, but if we're talking about Timo Meyer here, the Sharks aren't granting anyone access right now to make that negotiation. It's not being allowed.
right. So if
So there is that side.
maybe we want to give Lamoriello a little credit here, where he's like, look, I'd rather, because apparently he didn't speak with either Kadri or Gaudreau, right? That's the consensus.
Okay.
I let's just go with that, right? Let's just
Sure.
go with he didn't talk about it, right? Let's give Lamoriello credit. He was like, you know what? That's too rich for my blood. I'd rather go with what I know. Let's see what we got. A couple young kids in Bridgeport. I feel confident about the defense is younger. Let's just go with it. I think there's more opportunity to be had with better younger players at the trade deadline. I don't know that to be true at all, but
If history, what's the terminology I'm
if
looking
history is
for?
any
Is any indication? Thank you. That's when he strikes.
So he may have just thought, whether he ultimately didn't pull the trigger last summer, whether he was in talks with them or not, and whose bullshit is whatever, it doesn't matter. He ultimately decided not to do it. And looking at who's an RFA and a UFA this season at the trade deadline, and who he thought he could make a deal with, that may have been more exciting. He decided not to do JT Miller for whatever reason. Kadri didn't happen for whatever reason. Gaudreau didn't happen. Okay. I mean, he's got to show his hand now. He's got to do something to prove that true. But there are a lot of, I think, better opportunities that are, no, he's not thinking long term, but are just better for the organization. While he's in the position, I think he's thinking long term. Right? I think you have, unless you're going to rebuild, I think that's the way you have to look at it. But because he's not going to, if it's to be believed that Chris Lamoriello is the next GM, he's not going to screw his son. So he's gonna put him in a decent position. So I don't think there's, I think there's something there. But if he looked at this trade deadline and said, I think there's better opportunity there for younger players and for longer term, that again, he has to prove that to be true, right? It's easy for me to say that. If he doesn't do anything, it really does have to be Timo Meyer-esque, right? It really can't be anybody. Like, I can't even think of a second or third tier player, right? I think that's like a secondary move. I think that's, if you think Pelech is coming back now that you have a Wallerspoon and you have an Aho and even a Salo below that and a Bolt, I think you're okay on D. I don't think you need to do that.
Yeah.
Maybe you do just for whatever. Just to send Salah back and get consistent playing time in Bridgeport, you just get a veteran defenseman to be your 7D. Similar to who did Lamoriello bring in a couple of years ago? Coburn? Or something like that. Like,
Coburn.
Even that's probably not as good of a player as I'm thinking, but like maybe a player better than that. A veteran, something Not Andy Green, but not Coburn, like somewhere in between that.
Right.
As your seventh defenseman, I think that's perfectly fine. Or, I mean, you put Witherspoon back down, I think that's fine, but he's there for the playoffs and taxi squad if that's where what it comes to. But on offense, you got to land a big fish here.
Right. And just for an example of a second tier player, it can't be an Anthony Duclair. Great player. We were banging on that drum a couple of summers ago. He's not. He's great, and he was a good fit for Florida. 30 goals there. Coming off an injury now, like he's not the guy. He's still a second tier guy, despite scoring 30 goals. Like you need, and I wrote this a couple days ago. You need a Meyer. You need a Horvat. You need a Tarasenko. He's still a guy who they could use.
I think that's where I think that's a second tier option for Lamoriello. That would have been a good. That would have been something to. He's just an older player. Like I'm thinking, like I said, I think you go for that 24 to 27-year-old player at this point that you can get some term under. Again, you're trying to set your son up. I think that's fair to operate under. I don't think if you're going to do something at the trade deadline and you're going to give up assets, that return needs to be huge. It's not a rental.
Yeah, so
I don't think that's what he's going to be going for. He's going to sign somebody, and it's not going to be.
Yeah,
Palmieri was 28, 29 when he came. Like that was a little older, but it'll be 33, 34 when that contract's over. That's not the end of the world. He can play on the third line eventually. Like that's not a bad move in projection.
If you're looking at guys who are going to be, free agents, whether that be UFA or RFA. It's Timo Meyer. Is Patrick Kane realistic? I don't know.
That might be the only exception to this.
Yeah,
because I think that again, you can get him on a short-term deal to a degree. Like he's 34, so getting him on a 3-year deal, would he do that? I don't know. And then do 1 years after that, I'm not really sure. Would I play with Barzal? Maybe that might give him a huge jump. Look at Ovechkin. Look at Crosby. Kane is kind of in that category, as much as what am I questioning of him as an actual person? But
I know
as a player, he's great,
and I know he's 34. But in my opinion, the way he looks right now versus his longevity, I think he can play this way for another 3 or 4 years. So I'm not.
I think he'd be rejuvenated next to Barzal.
Yeah, I'm not super worried about that. Like that's not something I'm worried about. But like looking at the UFA class, like after Tarasenko, like you said, he's a little older. Like you don't want to sign that guy. These aren't that's not the move that you're looking to do. Dylan Larkin, David Pastrnak, I can't see that happening. I think that he stays in Boston. Bo Horvat. After that, like maybe Tyler Bertuzzi, but that's you're teetering on. I think Tyler Bertuzzi, if he could stay healthy, he could be that first line guy, but he's having struggles there. He's only scored 1 goal in 13 games this year. The UFA class just doesn't look good in that sense of trying to, get yourself a top line guy outside of Meyer, outside of Kane. And if for the longevity route, right?
Yeah.
Dylan Larkin's a center. Do you move Matthew Barzal over and get a Dylan Larkin? I don't know. That's,
I mean, you're going to get fleeced by Yzerman. I don't know that, right?
100%.
Yeah. So I don't.
And then now you got to look to the restricted free agent class, right? And, is anybody there going to be available, right? A DeBrincat. Well, Ottawa just got him. I doubt that he's going to be going anywhere. Pierre-Luc Dubois. Doubt that he's going anywhere either because he's made it pretty clear he wants to just go to Montreal once he's done with Winnipeg. Jesper Bratt. I don't think that the Devils are giving him up. Lafreniere, I think he's destined to go somewhere outside of New York because no one is going to be trading with each other between the two New York teams. Like these are... Again, nothing here is really viable. So like you're limited here in your options. Like for a guy who you're going to trade for, that's going to be a long-term, a long-term return.
Yeah, ish. right? Like you have to have at least 2 or 3 years. It really depends on what they're asking for. Like I think that's kind of part of the problem.
Right.
You don't you don't want to sell the farm to a degree, but that's where it has to be young. Like you can't give up ridiculous amount for Kane and then he leaves after 3 years and you have you might
No.
not have anything to show for it and kind of give that value to Chicago like that in the short term. Like I don't know that you can really do that. And Lamoriello has a lot to think about because they haven't had a first round pick in a long time.
Right.
They've traded away a lot of them,
And this is like a super good draft class.
This is a great draft class. The Islanders, I think, are going to be surprised by some of their forwards that are able to come up, but we're seeing a Holmstrom struggle. He's young, but he's struggling. Ratu is playing great, but he's a center, and they have a little bit of a logjam, so they have some things to figure out. They made it work with Zizekas, and I don't think it's impossible. It's good to know that they're at least willing to do that to a degree, and that it worked. Now they know it worked, so they can do that if they really need to. Dufour could be something. I think he's having an okay year there. After that, I don't, the forward group is kind of thin. I think Fashing is great, and that's a good bottom six option in the future, or fourth line replacement. Although Zizekas may not be on that line, so it's kind of we're spinning our tires a little bit, but it's you got to stock the pond at some point. You can't just keep doing this. This isn't necessarily an option. I do want to get to, so I had put out a call for some questions. We didn't really get any questions. We did get a lot of comments. So from Jacket, and there's a bunch of numbers. Sorry, I didn't write all of them down. He said Timo. We've kind of discussed that at length. I obviously think that's a great option. I think you do as well. Ariel Cornfield, is Timo the move? I
Yes.
think we both. It's one of the moves. I don't know if it's capital T the move, but it is a series. It has to be that.
Oh,
level.
it's capital T the move. If they can't do it, there has to be a contingency plan here. But it's capital.
Okay. I'm with that. He also they also asked, is it Lambert's fault, or is it the roster he was given? We've also kind of touched on that a little bit. It's probably a little bit of both, and I think that's probably it's a little bit of everyone's fault. The players have to own some of this themselves. Lambert is not having a lot of success, and Lamoriello did not set up Lambert for success. So yeah, that's probably that. Melts 86 questioning the vets, us too. That's just like we said. Flip 0077. He says clean house. I think too far.
Let's park a minute on that one. What does cleaning house look like?
I think that's what we were saying before. Like, I don't know what blowing it up means, and if that means trading a Nelson. Like, you're talking about. It's one thing to add a player and push people down. It's another thing to like have your bottom six and rebuild your top six. That's so freaking hard.
Also,
I don't know what. Like, I don't even know what. Like, they don't have the cap space for that. I guess without Nelson, but does he have a no trade? Like, where's he going? Who's taking that? Who can afford that deal? I think that's what we have to think about. Who can afford the deal?
Brock Nelson's deal?
Yeah.
He
signed for a bit more.
$6 million a year for the next 2 years. Well, this year and then 2 years after. He's got an minimal no trade clause, so he's got a 16-team no trade list.
Yeah, so it's not impossible. It happens all the time, but it's not easy. So like, right. I don't know. I think the defense.
Well, here's the thing that I think about the most with cleaning house, right? If you're going to clean house, which implies going into a rebuild, are we on the same page there?
I mean, that's probably what it leads to. I think it's really just the forward group, and that's why I don't agree with that it's a rebuild, because I think there really is a good bottom six there. If they just move on from a clutter.
No, I'm just saying in the sense of cleaning house. right? If we're saying clean house, that's rebuilding, in my opinion, and just in general.
It might be a serious. I would put it on a serious retool, but that might just be difference in opinion.
Well, if we're doing a serious retool and we're thinking of the future here, it doesn't make sense to keep Sorokin and trade him. He's going to win you games. You're trying to get higher draft picks.
Yeah, I see. That's why I say retool, because I think there's
correct. That's why I'm like, cleaning house doesn't work here for me, because you have, in my opinion, the possible best goaltender in the NHL. You have the center, you have the defenseman, and a pretty good blue line. Like, I don't think that you need to blow this thing up. I think you need a serious retool. A rebuild, a clean house doesn't work for me, because now we're talking long term. We're talking third year of UBS Arena having 50% capacity. Not going to work for anyone.
Yeah, I do think it's a difference in a perfect world. To me, there's 5 players on the current roster that don't return next year.
5.
Bailey,
you're talking
Bailey, Beauvillier, Clutterbuck, Martin.
Martin?
I think both. They're cooked, dude.
You think?
I mean, I guess keep them there or whatever. That's not really a big deal with Fashing and Cizikas. Like that works. And I'm not sure. Maybe it was only 4, but maybe not Parise, and not because I don't like him. I don't know where you.
No,
fit
I
him
just
in.
I think you know that. Great, I understand he's making only $750,000, but there are incentives there for him to make more. But those small things add up.
Players. Yeah, it's a third of it's a quarter of their forward group.
And for God's sakes, what the hell are they doing with Ross Johnston? Like, it doesn't make any inkling of sense to me.
Oh, okay, yeah. If you want to count him in that, I think that's enough. That's a serious retool. I don't know what you replace them with, and they just like this. The whole, and we said it. I said this a million times. Like, I don't understand what's happening. Like, Soshnikov, Bellows. Just you may as well not have done anything,
right?
Or just have Holmstrom up. He's here now anyway with injuries. Like, you could have just had like
Cholowski. Like,
it could have anybody.
I mean, it worked out for Fashing in a sense. Fashing has been a revelation, if you will, but a bottom 6 revelation. He's not a top 6 answer. He's great. Don't get me wrong. Like, you could. How old is he? Is he even? He's 27. Okay. You could have him be part of that new look 4th line when Clutterbuck and Martin eventually go.
Yeah.
That's his role, though. Like, we're not talking, oh, great, I found Hudson Fashing last summer. No, that's not.
I cannot believe he was on the first line. Like, I think that's where, you got to give Lambert credit, like something. It's not entirely his fault, but that's terrible. I can't believe that. That's what Lamoriello was like. Oh yeah, this guy. Because again, Lamoriello controls who's getting called up. All he can do is look at the roster that's there, and Lambert's like, I need a winger. Do something. And that's what happened. Because they're not going on best player available. They're like convinced we need to put this player in this position. And it's like, maybe just put the best, it's like drafting anybody. The best player available versus drafting for a position. And this is probably not exactly a 1-to-1, but just pick the best player available. That's going to be a better choice 10 out of 10 times. Who's your best player in Bridgeport? Just bring them up and put them in the lineup. Really? You're going to go with this? I guess it's a good surprise with that. Great. But I don't know. It's very frustrating to just watch like middling players get put with Barzal, and then we're like, why is Barzal bad? That's me, right? I'm asking why Barzal is bad. And you're like, well, it's the players. And I'm like, well, he's also playing like shit. And again, both things can be true there. But like, we're just all the time. We're just saying the same thing because we're just watching the same thing.
Yeah, it feels like, when does this saga come to an end? I don't know. I want to believe that it's soon, just because of the fact that, like I stated earlier in the show, from my understanding and a couple others who I work with is understanding, this is Lamoriello's last year. There was no contract in place. He's got to prove something. I know management has said, in Lou we trust, but I think there's also something to say about having to stay face for reasons that aren't spoken about in public, right? There's got to be some sort of incentive for the owners to want to bring this guy back.
If nothing happens, you're gonna lose this fan base.
Right.
I
So
don't care what your reason is. You can
you
literally
have
say,
to,
I don't think there's anything that they can say.
right, and they have to figure out, if he's not gonna help us put asses in chairs, then we're gonna have to figure out what that looks like, and maybe like I said, there's no extension in place. Maybe they have to figure that out. Maybe that's what's coming in the summer. But as of right now, no extension in place. You'd think that he's maybe a little motivated to get something done. You'd have to wonder if that's the thought process right now.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, or guess anyway, I just the trade deadline was more attractive than the offseason, so doors open, Lou. I guess make your move. There seems to be some options available. It's kind of on you. Again, if nothing happens there, you can't blame anybody else.
Right.
His inane rules that he puts on the entire league dictates whether or not this team is good. Like, that's silly. Was he lucky that the JT Miller thing didn't work out and he was terrible this season? Yeah, I guess so. But how many other deals may there have been for good players? And he was like, I don't know, whatever you want to say, whatever. It just is ridiculous that it's old school for old school's sake, and being mean, big, scary guy is so silly. I just don't understand. Make your hockey team better. Stop making the whole league jump through hoops. No one's going to do that. No one's doing it. Surprise. No one's doing it. Unless he has like a prior relationship with a team or something like that. I don't know. It's frustrating. I think we've beaten this into the ground, though.
Just something to think about as I'm thinking about options, but for some reason or another, I can't remember why, but next, or in the summer, maybe even leading up to it, because they're not in playoff position right now, but the Florida Panthers, I think, have to make a decision on a contract or two. And I remember, if I remember correctly, Friedman and Marek were talking about, the Panthers having to make a decision on who to keep, one of the two, Sam Bennett or Sam Reinhart. Sam Reinhart is really intriguing to me, in my opinion.
I don't know their contract situation. Reinhart is 6.5 for this year, next year, and Sam Bennett is almost 4.5.
Yeah.
Until 24, 25.
So Reinhart, 27 years old, he had 33 and 82 points, 33 goals, 82 points last season. Now, Florida's not playing half as good as they were this year. He's got 13 goals, 30 points in 45 games. Yeah, I wonder if that's a guy that maybe, you try and hone in on, someone like that. I mean, Sam Bennett too, but he's not the same echelon, in my opinion. Sam Bennett's more of a, he bangs bodies more and stuff like that. He's not like an elite scorer. Like, they need that elite scorer. I think Reinhart has that in him. I don't think. I think Bennett's just a good support player.
Yeah, I mean, he's never scored 20 goals. and Sam Bennett. Sam Reinhart is a much different track record. He scored 20 goals, 25 goals in a number of times. Like you said, 33 goals last season. That could be an option. He's only been in Florida. This is only his second year there after coming over from Buffalo. That could be interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know what Florida wants.
Yeah, I don't know. Just thinking out loud kind of thing.
No, that's a good thought. I think we've beaten it into the ground though.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think we managed to touch on our notes here, but I don't know. We did it in some crazy order. That was, I guess in short, I really don't want to go into this too much just because it's late, but that Caps game was huge, and it's disappointing that they lost. They had a game, they have a game in hand on the Caps. There's an opportunity to be a really big swing. The Penguins wound up winning in overtime, I believe. They were down 3-2 with a few minutes left, and I really thought that I was like, all right, the Islanders are going to get a point, Penguins are going to lose. Like that's going to wind up being really good, and everything kind of got reversed all at once. So it really just hurt the Islanders. But yeah, Sorokin's really the only thing keeping him in it these days, and as we discussed all episode, Lamoriello has really got to step it up here, and I think the guys in the locker room really need to step it up to be able to move forward.
Yeah, can we just talk about the hit on Peugeot real quick? Just because I tweeted a video of the hit, and I said that, and I don't know if you saw this, I said it's somewhere between charging and boarding for me. Don't love the hit. I know you said that it's not necessary. We got to get that kind of hit out of the game. I got some pushback on that, and I was surprised because look at the definition of charging. Ovechkin took 8 strides before making that hit. 8. But that alone is enough to give him a charging call. And I understand nothing, no discipline after the game and no call in the game, which was, again, still surprising to me. But I don't know, what are we looking at here? Now, people were also saying Ovechkin gets away with that kind of thing. He has and always will. Is this something to do with, the chase for greatness? I have no idea. But that's a charging call. Like, easy for me. 8 strides. You're supposed to stop moving your feet before you make a hit, right?
He did for like a second, but it's still a lot of strides.
It's too many strides. He didn't stop moving his feet long enough. And this is where things get tricky because we can't sit here and be like, okay, now there needs to be a timer between how long he stops moving his feet to when he makes the point of contact. Like, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying was that he very clearly ramped himself up to make that hit. And if we're gonna look at in the sense of I think there's a stronger argument for charging, but if we're gonna look at it in the sense of boarding, you got him in the head. It was a headshot. Against the boards.
Yeah, so I was like, say boarding. I don't know if it matters if Peugeot was directly against the boards. I don't know the rule exactly. Ovechkin does I don't think he leaves his feet. His heels are definitely off the ice, but he's launching himself up a little bit. The boards may have stopped him from ultimately leaving his feet, or Peugeot rather. I don't like the hit. I think it is about 2 seconds or so, which is within that limit. After Peugeot gets rid of the puck, I still don't like those hits. He's not going for the puck. He's not separating the guy from the puck. It's not a good play. Like I said, I don't like when Clutterbuck does it. I don't like when Martin does it because you see them off to the side. The defenseman in their own zone passes it out, and then you see Clutterbuck or Martin swoop in and hit him. They're going the opposite direction of the puck, and they're just going to make this hit. No wonder they lead the league in hits every year. Like, it's unnecessary. Like, they're not doing it. I guess I get to a degree that it makes players think twice. And look, it changed the game, right? Penalty or not, that changes the game. Unless the Islanders score on the power play. It was a momentum shifter. He definitely did what he was supposed to do. And it's supposed to make you think twice and make a mistake. So you're looking around to get hit instead of looking at where the puck is. And maybe you miss it. Maybe you fumble it. Maybe you make a bad pass. I understand that to a degree. I just it may have a little bit to do with who Ovechkin is. It may have not been a call. Maybe there's something we're missing there. We can not like it. I think that's fair. But yeah, I don't understand. It's a lot of strides. Peugeot's on the boards. It's just a dangerous hit. Like Ovechkin is 240 pounds. If Peugeot is 180, I'd be surprised. That's an enormous difference. That alone is going to hurt some people. I understand you got to be prepared out there, but like Peugeot is kind of unsuspecting there, and maybe that's on him for not being prepared. But
JZ Peugeot's 5'10", 180.
yeah, there's a 60-pound difference. No wonder he got fucking annihilated. Like you can't do anything about the size difference, but Ovechkin's got a one-track mind. He's just seeing a player. I don't want to like victim blame, but Peugeot's got to like turn away, do something. He just like kind of left himself available for that. He was just trying to get the puck out. I understand, but that doesn't mean Ovechkin comes 7 strides in and do that.
Right.
In a league, it's tough like victim blaming stuff in the NHL because it's the NHLPA could argue for the rule change to like make anything different. And they choose not to do that. We've had that discussion on this podcast before. They're not looking out for each other necessarily because when it comes down to like arbitrations and this, the NHLPA is repping both. They don't want to lose this player from being in the league and lose money and this and that, but they other players hurt. So like I don't understand how they managed to do that and rep both players, and then the NHL is also involved. So like I don't get any of that stuff. But I think that's a necessary. Like he left himself kind of open there. It's kind of like turning into the boards when like some players have done that. It's happened a lot less. You don't see nearly as many videos as you used to, but players will like turn themselves into the boards, and somebody that in the middle of a hit, they can't stop themselves. They've already kind of committed to X, Y, and Z. It's always very confusing to me. Like I don't know how that works, and that the speed of the game. Maybe Peugeot just like didn't see him. He didn't think Ovechkin was to take 9 strides over to him over on the boards and come and hit him. That I guess that would be understandable, but hope Peugeot's okay moving forward. I'm not really sure he should have came back in the game. They wound up losing. He kind of wasn't the same after that. I'd be a little timid too, but and especially after no one came to your defense, which doesn't seem like a very Islander thing, frankly. I'm a little worried about that. Sticking up for one another. They're supposed to be playing for each other. They've been teammates for a very long time, a lot of these players.
Right.
And it's not really defensible to me. I don't like fights just for the sake of it, and it wasn't a penalty. So, but for clean hits, no one likes those fights after that, but there's something to be said about that. Like you just, all right, so let the clean hit be the momentum changer.
Well, that's exactly what
sure.
happened. Like after that hit, like the momentum shifted completely in the Capitals' favor, and sure, it's because Ovechkin did what he did, but also because the Islanders did nothing about it. So there was no fire.
Yeah. So and then the Islanders didn't try to put it out. They let the Capitals light the fire, and then the Islanders didn't put it out. And they let theirs go out on their own. Like, and then they kind of gave the game away, which was really disappointing. Any other last thoughts before we wrap up here?
Just, I don't know if you want to. We don't have to talk about it, but Ivan Provorov broke news tonight. Did you? I
did not see that.
Okay, so the Philadelphia Flyers were wearing their Pride pregame warm-up jerseys, and Ivan Provorov opted not to take pregame skate because he did not want to wear the jersey. He cited religious beliefs. So that's happening right now.
That's ridiculous. That's not a thing.
Correct.
I just We don't often get into that kind of stuff, but hating people is not a religious belief. I really hate to break it to you. Don't cite it when it's convenient, because if that was the case, um, it would be the opposite. I can't stress that enough. And then there's another guy that was in the South Pacific, South SPHL, that was making some rounds. I looked it up before just to see what he was saying, but he was going on some rants, and Southern Professional Hockey League, I believe is what it is. And the league, I think suspended his contract, and I think maybe just kind of like terminated or something like that. Go follow Players Against Hate or Pride Tape or something like that on Instagram. They support all this kind of stuff. Don't support Ivan Provorov. That's stupid. Support everyone who wants to be involved in hockey, and Black Girl Hockey Club and Pride Tape and any of these groups really helping others get involved. As we started the show with Gino Ojic, he supported Indigenous peoples in the game, and that's also really important. So yeah, bad for hockey, bad for people in general. Like don't do that. That seems pretty low hanging fruit there.
The
That's
statements is not great.
that's
From Tortorella says, with Provorov, he's being true to himself and to his religion.
that I look. Tortorella is an idiot, like an actual moron.
The
So
Flyers put out a statement themselves. The Philadelphia Flyers organization is committed to inclusivity, and is proud to support the LGBTQ plus community. Many of our players are active in their support of local LGBTQ plus organizations, and we were proud to host our annual Pride Night again this year. The Flyers will continue to be strong advocates for inclusivity and LGBTQ plus community.
yeah, so that's where these players that want to be allies and they do this work with these organizations. It starts with telling that guy he's a fucking moron and having that conversation with him. That was the same thing a couple years ago after George Floyd, and having those conversations. It's short of convincing people, but you have to call them out. That's what that is. You can't do that. Those conversations are not for the LGBTQ community to have with people outside of that community. It's not their job to do that. They don't have an issue. People have an issue with them. And it's the people, it's the position of allies to stand up for them in these moments. And it's his teammates that really need to hold him accountable. That's what being an ally is. And hopefully they're doing that. It doesn't seem like they are, because he didn't do it. And I wouldn't want to play with him. I wouldn't want to work with anybody like that, just in general.
It's just like when you think we're making progress here, something has to happen.
I was listening to You Can't Do That. I've mentioned them on this show before.
You can't do that.
Oh, yes. First of all, the producers are fantastic. They do such a good job on that show. They also have a Patreon, which I've been meaning to subscribe to, because I think it's really cheap and I'm sure it's really funny. I don't get all the references because they mention like horoscopes and different things, and I truly don't understand any of that. But it's funny in how they do it. Anyway, one of them said, if we leave the game, we can't change it. Right? It'd be easy enough to just say, I don't want to be involved in this anymore because it's misogynistic, it's toxic masculinity, it's anti-LGBTQ, it's xenophobic, it's whatever. The fans suck. The players don't stand up for any of this except for performative shit. It doesn't matter. But if we leave it, we like this thing, but if we leave it, we can't change it. We're letting it kind of happen and letting it win. And this is one of those moments when you can be really frustrated and you can want to kind of give up on it and you can not understand. And And I think all of that is valid to a degree, but I think it's talk about being true to who you are. I think not, standing against hate and, in our case, at the risk of people probably either fast forwarding or having stopped listening to at this point, like that's the kind of thing, like that's what that is.
Yeah.
Citing religious bullshit, so that you can hate just because it's convenient and you can use it for hate. Yeah, talk about not right. That's just simply not how that works. So,
On a funnier note, on a brighter note, let's get past that. Not in the show that way, but did you hear Nick Foligno's hot mic yesterday?
so I didn't quite understand what he said. I saw some people like I just didn't know what led up to that. So like contextually, like I guess it was funny without it, but it definitely needed a little more.
So he received a roughing penalty. I didn't see the play beforehand, but I'm assuming he didn't partake in any of the roughing, and he received a roughing call anyways. So he skates up to the referee, and clear as day in his mic as he's making the announcement to the stat keepers, as they always do, and they show it on TV too. He goes, "So you're telling me I should just go fucking pound his face in?" And like it was clear as day in the microphone of the referee, and it is possibly the funniest hot mic I've ever heard. If you didn't hear it,
funny. We need. I kind of wish that HBO would like do a game a month where it was like no announcers and just like the hot mics. I'm sure like everybody would be
I think
outed. I'm sure it would be really bad, but
I think they've experimented with like not whole games, but like segments of play. They've done that.
yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a huge segment of
TNT does it. That's who does it.
Yeah.
TNT does it on their broadcasts.
There's a big section of fans. I mean, like look at 24/7 and how popular that was, and these behind the scenes stuff. I think it's I mean, it's heavily edited, but it's still so interesting.
Well, I was going to say
those behind the scenes
because I was listening to who else but Marek and Freeman, and they were talking about something similar. How like everything, there's an appetite for everything behind the scenes. Like at some point, people are going to want to see the behind the scenes of how we prepare for this show. And Freeman was outright. He was like, I wouldn't want that. He's like, honestly, I would not want that, because he goes, there's a place in the world for outrage, but there's also a lot of false outrage out there. And you and I off the microphone, we get on each other and like we know we're joking with each other and we have our fun. He's like, but we couldn't do that in that kind of scenario. And like, we wouldn't want to deal with the false outrage and the, all the bullshit that comes with it, because we're friends and, we joke around with each other, but the way we joke around with each other off microphone, people wouldn't like it. Like, that's what he was saying. And I was like, that's, there's definitely something to be said about that. So I don't know, that was funny.
Yeah, I haven't listened to them in a while. I have to go make sure I listen to that podcast.
Yeah, they're good.
Ready to wrap this up?
Do it.
Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to or watch the show. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Nasman Hockey. You can find James' work at The Fourth Period, and make sure you check out Isles Fix. They're growing subscriber base. It is paid now, and they do some free stuff occasionally. You might find NHP on there occasionally. James writes for them, so half of NHP is there at least. And it's a good newsletter, always good little tidbits and bits of news and things in there. So make sure you check them out. James, bring us home, buddy.
Until next time, all. Let's go Islanders.